Okay, so hi students. Today we are going to learn about a new topic, that is clauses under English grammar itself. So before we go ahead, let's understand what is something that we are going to learn about in clauses. So as you can see, basically we will be focusing on what is a clause, what is the difference between a phrase and a clause. I'm very sure you must have heard this term as well very often. What is a dependent and independent clause? How to identify a clause? Mostly it will be taken in a first half, and then we are also going to understand what are the types of clauses and how to identify its types. So the skills and focus. We all know that, whenever we learn about something, simultaneously we are in the process enhancing or, developing some skills as well. So with this new learning, you are going to enhance your critical thinking skills. How critical thinking? Because you will be critically analyzing and evaluating each sentences. What does that include? Which all other parts of speech? Whether a given sentence is a clause or a phrase. What is the difference? You have to critically think, right? Even identify the types of clause will be somewhere that you will, it's a very shouting out skill that you will enhance. Communication skills, yes, in terms of listening effectively, if we see this as a session, but definitely at your end, even, reading will be somewhere that you will be developing at your own end. Let's go ahead and let's get started. So here is one word, squirrel. Squirrel, it's just one word. Now it is written, the fast red squirrel. So now I can see that it's not just now limited to one particular word, right? Now it has few more words as well. So when we have a group of words, then it is called phrase. Phrase can convey a meaning to some extent, but it will not make a complete sense. The fast red squirrel, what? I have some more data, some more details, but then what about that squirrel? What is it doing or what else? I need some more information, right? Now let's look at this sentence. The fast red squirrel darted up a tree. Now this is somewhere now I know that it is not only now limited to one word, that squirrel, but I have some group of words associated with it that describes the squirrel, what kind of squirrel, it's a fast red. Now what it is doing, I have further information with me that it's, it darted up a tree. So I have more detail, more information. Now that is making a complete sense. And this is called clause. Right? Are we clear so far till now? So let's understand in a more detailed manner what exactly is a clause. So understand, word is just a smallest unit of meaning. Okay, it doesn't convey any meaning as such in detail. It's just the smallest unit. I have just one word, squirrel. Phrase. Now what is a phrase? Phrase is a small groups of words intend to convey a meaning. As I mentioned, it's just a group of words which has an intention but unable to make a complete sense. Now, what is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contains a subject, the noun or pronoun about which something is being said, right? It has a verb. So if we look at the previous sentence, I know it has a verb as well. Which verb? Darted. What the squirrel was actually doing. So yes, I have further information. So if we understand why it is a clause, because it has a main person or an or main idea that I'm going to that I'm talking about. Here my main person, or here I can say the main animal or anything that I'm talking about is squirrel. So squirrel is a subject. Now what is the squirrel doing? Action, darted. It darted. Action words, we know it's a verb. So when it has a subject and a verb, it can be said as clause. You know, sometimes clause are simple as a simple sentence as well, but then it varies depending upon the types that we are going to learn in the further slides now. So what is a clause exactly? It's a group of words that contains a subject and a verb in simple language. Okay. Next, let's understand.
Hi. In this quick video, I will define a clause and explain the differences between an independent and a dependent clause using several examples. A clause is a group of related words that consist of both a subject and a verb. The following sentence is a clause. The student studied in the library. You can see that the sentence contains a subject, in this case the student, and a verb, studied. It is important to note that both the subject and the verb is required to form a clause. If you only have either a subject or a verb, the group of words may form a phrase, but not a complete clause. For example, the group of word studies biology is not a clause because it does not contain a subject. To be a clause, there needs to be a subject in the sentence. You need to identify who it is that studies biology. For example, a complete clause would be Jane studies biology. Clauses can be independent or dependent. Understanding the difference between independent and dependent clauses can help you to avoid fragments in your writing and to vary the lengths of your sentences. This helps you to improve your writing and can also make your writing sound more academic. An independent clause makes sense on its own. It is a complete thought. In other words, an independent clause is a group of words that can stand alone as a complete sentence. Here are two examples. The teacher explained the difference between an electron and a proton. And the research demonstrates that the new vaccine effectively eliminates viral load in patients. Each of these sentences form a complete thought and can stand alone. Therefore, each of these sentences represents an independent clause. A dependent clause is not a complete thought and needs more information to be complete. In other words, a dependent clause cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. It needs to be attached to an independent clause to be complete. Here are two examples. While I was studying in the library, if the teacher does not provide the class notes on time. In both examples, the sentence is not complete. You do not know what happened while the person was studying in the library, or what will happen if the teacher does not provide the notes on time. As such, these clauses are dependent, as they need more information to be complete. There are certain clues that can help you to identify the dependent clauses in a sentence. You can look for punctuation clues such as commas and brackets, and you can look for certain words that are commonly used to mark a dependent clause. Examples of these words include while, if, unless, although, because, since, and when. Use of any of these words indicate a dependent clause.
So students, what we understood from the video, it gave us further idea that what exactly is clause, and we discussed about the two types. That is, first is independent clause. Now what is an independent clause? We understood that it makes sense on its own. It doesn't need any further ideas or words with it. Independent means, for example, I am having my breakfast, right? So that's it. I don't need any other idea. Now, if I say, though I had my breakfast, I am feeling hungry. Now understand what I mentioned here. Though, what I mentioned, I said, though I had my breakfast, I am still feeling hungry, right? So now just understand, what did it mention? That it has a two parts, right? The first half says that I don't need any further information with me. Just assume that I am just reading the second half. I am still feeling hungry. It is an independent clause. Why it is an independent clause? It makes sense on its own. It's not an incomplete information, right? It's not an incomplete. I'm still feeling hungry. But if I say just this much, though I had my breakfast, it's a dependent. Why it is dependent? Because separately I cannot use that sit, though I had my breakfast, full stop. Will it make sense? No. It needs some information to make a complete sense, to give a complete idea. So if I read this much only, though I had my breakfast, then what? It's a dependent clause. It needs some more information to complete. That's why it is depended on something, on some word or some other information. Hence it is called dependent clause. Independent clause means it is self-sufficient. Though right now I can see that I'm feeling hungry, even if I just separate it from the first half, I can still make sense that I'm feeling hungry. But though I had my breakfast, it can have some other information as well. I am still not satisfied with the food. I'm still feeling hungry. Though I had my breakfast, but still I'm not sure. Like any other information can be there. But if I say I'm feeling hungry, it's a complete information. So even in this sentence, one sentence, we could understand that it has a independent clause as well and dependent clause as well, right? Let's go back to the slides now. So just to sum up your understanding of independent and dependent, it makes sense on its own as a sentence. Example, I went to school. And dependent doesn't make sense on its own as a sentence. Although I wasn't feeling well, I went to school. I went to school is an independent, but this dependent was dependent on actually the last part. I went to school. I cannot separately use although I wasn't feeling well, then what? What is the next information? What is the complete information? So although I wasn't feeling well is depended on I went to school. Hence it is dependent clause. I hope we are pretty clear so far. If not, take a pause, take your time, recall all the understanding and then go ahead. Moving ahead now, let's check your understanding of independent and dependent clause. So now here we have a few questions and you have to first identify. So it's not about independent or dependent, but to understand first the basic idea. Are you clear with clause also or not? So given a sentence, you have to identify whether it's a phrase or a clause, right? Quickly, phrase, group of words doesn't make sense on its own. Clause gives a complete information and it has a subject and verb. Now let me read this. The apple of my eye. The apple of my eye, what do you think? Okay, if I say that the apple of my eye is a phrase. Yes. Why? It's just a group of words. The apple of my eye, there is no subject as such. Who is the apple of my eye? I don't have like complete information. It's just a phrase. Moving ahead. I went to the dentist and she told me my teeth looked great. I only have to identify the bolded section. Huh? Don't get confused. It's written identify whether the bolded section of the sentence is a clause or phrase. To the dentist. To the dentist, it's a prepositional phrase, right? So it's a phrase. It's just 3 words, nothing else. Okay, that's great. Next. While you were napping. While you were napping. Who was napping? You were napping. Now what do you think? Is it a phrase or a clause? Okay. Let me click here. Yeah. Why so? Because napping, you are doing something, right? You are having an action, doing. Napping is a verb. Who is doing that? You are doing that. Who is the subject? That means who is the main person I'm talking about? You. And what are you doing? Napping. Napping is a verb. You is a subject. It has a subject and a verb. Hence, it is called clause. The last question now. Dorothy asked for a glass of water after she invited herself in. After she invited herself in. What do you think? Let me give this clue as a random one and you have to guess it. After she invited. I hope that's pretty clear. We are clear with the phrase and the clause. Why this is a clause? Because again, as I mentioned, it has a subject, it has a verb. What is the subject? She. I know I'm talking about she. What she did, or what is something that is action? Inviting is also an action, hence it's a clause. But it will be which clause? Any guesses? After she invited. I know that there must be some initial information as well, right? So it is a dependent clause. Let's go back to the slides now. Exit ticket for this part only. And here we have a clause song. And it's a very interesting, I must say, which will give you further brief idea in a very innovative manner to sum up your understanding of clauses.
Clause makes sense on its own. She was bright, he is brave, they're sitting on a throne. If you add details to the phrase, put in the clause, he who is told is praised. The subordinate can be relative, if not the public modifies the noun. It can also be adverbial. What's that? I'll tell you when it modifies the verb. Adverbial, same when the task is done. For example, she was always right. Going to get this right. Clauses are just phrases. Bits of sentences joined up by conjunctions. For example, she was bright and he was brave. Gonna do well if you behave. A noun phrase hands down as its head. The large desk, the nice man, the rickety chair. There's also preposition phrase. After that, ever since it was better in those days. Can you tell if the verb is finite? If it is, it's probably on its own. She will win if they did their thinking. Finite. We all know clauses are just phrases. Bits of sentences joined up by conjunctions. For example, she was bright and he was brave. Gonna do well if you behave. And coordination. If subordination. These are just phrases. Bits of sentences.
Okay, so by this time we understood and we got to know some more terms as well in the video. So yes, taking those words, having the inquisitive nature, now what is coordinate, what is subordinate, you must be wondering, which is absolutely fine, because till now we have understood in a very crystal clear manner what are clauses. Now we are going to focus on what are the types of clauses. So moving ahead, as you can see, first is a main clause. Now, what is a main clause? It's just like a simple sentence, as I mentioned. It has a subject and a verb, and that's it. A very basic sentence like I like bananas, right? I know what is the subject here? I. What is the verb? Like. Liking is also a verb. So it has a subject, it has a verb, and it's a main clause. Simple, that contains a subject and an object and makes a sense on its own. Not necessarily every time it has an object, but yes, it has a subject and a verb. Now, let's understand. Here is a different one that says, just a second. Okay. So now let's understand the compound sentence, or we can also say that they are coordinate, the term that we got to know previously. So, you know, if I say I like pizza, it's a main clause, right? Why it's a main clause? I'm talking about myself, and what else? I am talking about the verb. But if I say I like pizza and burger, if I say I like pizza and burger. So here now you can see that it has and in it, which means it's a connective word. Like just like conjunctions, we know that conjunctions are nothing but connectors. They connect. I like pizza, I like burger, I like pizza and burger, right? So if I say that I like pizza and I like burger. Now, even if I split this sentence, it will still make sense. I like pizza, it's an independent clause. I like burger, it's again an independent clause. Though they are connected, but still they are independent on each other. But when I have connected them, it's a compound that is made up of two sentences. It's a compound sentence, and it is called a clause that is a coordinate clause. Why a coordinate clause? Because the clause or one clause or more clauses, they are connected with certain conjunctions. I like pizza, but I don't like burger. I like pizza, one clause. I don't like burger, again clause. I like pizza is an independent clause. Why? Not dependent on any other thing. It's a own making sense. I don't like burger. It's again not dependent on anything. It is also an independent clause. I like pizza, but I don't like burger. Now I have made it into one sentence. One single sentence. That means it's a compound sentence made up of two sentences in it, which is connected by the word but. It is connected by the word but. Hence, but, they are called but, and in all these conjunctions when it is used, they are called coordinate clause, right? Then the sentence will be called as compound sentence. It has subject and verb plus again subject and verb. Moving ahead, these are the further examples. As you can see, you can feed the dog or you can wash the clothes. You can feed the dog, you can wash the clothes. These two are connected by the word or. They have homework to do, yet they keep putting it off. Yet is the word, that means it's a coordinate clause, right? It is connected with these two words. As I mentioned, one more example previously using the word but. Again, as you can see, there is one more example. And the example is, he wanted to go to the beach, but it started raining. It started raining. He wanted to go to the beach. Both the clauses together are connected using the word but. Right? Moving ahead. Next, we have subordinate. Now, coordinate, we know that it's a conjunctions like or, and, but. But what are subordinate? It contains a subject and verb, definitely. It needs to be attached to a main clause. It cannot make sense on its own. For example, as you can see here, I first met her in Paris, where I lived as a small child. Where, right? So where is the word where it is connecting? It needs something to be attached to the main clause. I cannot simply say where I lived as a small child. What? What is the further information? I first met her in Paris. Where? So certain words like where, and further examples like if I say, I like to go for shopping. I like to do shopping from where I used to do some years ago as well, right? Again, it's a sentence that needs sense to be attached to a main clause, right? It can be referred to as multi-clause sentence as well, and that's why it is called complex sentence as well, right? These are the two joints again connected with the word where. It's not specifically conjunctions, right? But it gives further idea, further information. It can also have comma as well. After she picks me up, comma, mom is taking me to buy shoes, right? So it's not necessarily that it has to be a conjunction. It's simply a connection wherein using different words to give more further clarity of the information. Now it can have a connector with a comma as well or with the other words as well, right? Next we have independent clause. As we are already clear, here we have two independent clause. The cloud is moving fast. It's a not dependent on anything. It makes sense on its own. I can run faster is written. However, I will say that both are independent clause in one sentence. Now here you tell me, but is what? Is it a subordinate clause or a coordinate clause? But is a word that is a coordinate. Students, please understand that though this clause looks like multi-clause, that also called a complex sentence. If you just see this much, the cloud is moving fast. Simple sentence, independent clause. Agree? Now just see this much. I can run faster. Simple sentence again, an independent clause, not dependent on anything. Here it is connected with the word but. But we know is a coordinate, right? So the cloud is moving fast, but I can run faster. It has a lot of sentences, lot of clauses as well. But if we see individually, we are making sense. We are getting the clarity. In many clauses as well, this part is independent. This is making coordinate. And this is again an independent clause, right? Moving ahead. Again, as you can see, an independent clause can be a sentence by itself. That's it. The tree grew very tall. Simple sentence. Whom I'm talking about? Tree and very tall. So again, I know that it's making sense on its own. While eating breakfast, I read a comic book. Now, this is somewhere that again you please take your thinking time. After you're taking your thinking time, I believe that you would have also agreed that again, I can make three connections. My first connection, just focus this much. While eating breakfast, I know that it needs some more information, right? It needs some more information. So the first one, we know it's an independent clause, but while eating breakfast, what? It's a dependent clause. It is dependent on, I read a comic book. I read a comic book is a independent clause. It doesn't need any other information. But while eating breakfast, I read a comic book. Just focus on this part. While eating breakfast, it will not make sense on its own. So it's a dependent clause. Now, if I only read this, I read a comic book. Dependent on independent, right? Giving complete information. But adding a comma in between, I know that it's what? It's a Subordinate clause, right? Subordinate, we understood that words like while, where, commas, these are the words that is attached. So that means it gives me this much information that it has a dependent clause, it has a comma, which is making it a subordinate clause as a whole sentence, and it has an independent clause individually as well. If I only read this much, I read a comic book, right? I believe you are clear so far. Moving ahead. So here is an example of coordinate. As you can see, words like and but connected to independent clauses. So the cloud is moving fast, but I can run faster. And here is a dependent clause. Because I baked the second, cake, everyone had enough to eat. Everyone had enough to eat. Independent clause, right? Doesn't need any other information. Because I baked the second cake, what next? Say something. Now, what's the further information? Dependent clause. Together, it is connected with a comma. It's connected with a comma. That means it's a subordinate. So it's a dependent and subordinate clause, you can say both. Relative clause. What is the relation? We know it's a simple word. If you know what is the meaning of relation, then you will understand, okay, what is the relation? Who I'm talking about? You know, a woman who knows about spiders. Who? I like the place where. Where? So again, it varies from sentence to sentence. You have to understand. Now here I am using as a relation. I am giving some further information describing the noun in a different clause. You know, there is one trick to identify whether it's a relative clause or not. It will always describe a noun. Right here, my noun is woman, a common noun, right? So a woman who, a girl who travels. So again, who? A girl who likes to go to swimming. So again, I'm talking about a girl. Noun, describing it. Who likes swimming, right? So again, as you know, this is the subject. It has an action, but it is talking about what is the relation whom you are exactly talking about. Whom you are talking about. Who knows this? Who likes this? Who reads this? Who writes this? Who? Right? It's a relative clause. So relative clauses are a type of dependent clause and it describes a noun in a different clause. As you can see, one more example, who word is cut from a relative clause. It's not necessary every time it will have, but now as you can see, the bear you warned me about. So again, it has a noun. What? Bear. You warned me about. So you want me about is a, instead of saying the bear who ate my tent or something, the bear you warned me about ate me. So it can replace with some other set of words as well. Not necessarily that it will only have who as a word to describe a relative clause, right? As you can see, instead of using the word who, we have used you want me about. So it's a relative clause, okay? It always comes mostly after a noun. So let's recall. So I'll display you quick, slides and we'll just quickly recall. So sleeping is my favorite thing to do. Okay. Whose favorite thing? Mine. What is the subject? Mine. What I like to do? Sleeping. What is an action? Sleeping. What type of clause it is? Independent clause. Sleeping is my favorite thing to do. That's it. No further information required. A cracked window, let the cold wind through. So as you can see here, a cracked window, let the cold wind through. It's a one clause. But if I say a cracked window and a dog hole, so and is the word. And we know that if I say separately, it's a independent clauses as well. But if I want to read it as a whole sentence, it is connected by the word and. And is nothing but a conjunction. And conjunction means it's a coordinate clause. And if I see the last sentence, a window cracked by a hailstone. It's simply a group of words, nothing else. And don't have any subject here. right? It's a phrase.